Hi everyone, it's Tanya Stacey from Cup of Char Tea Channel, the place for all those tea addicts and tea lovers to build your tea knowledge. So this is the third episode of the Tea and Food interviews series that I'm doing over summer. And today's guest is Kym Cooper from the Steepery Tea Co up there in Brisbane. So Kym has specialised a lot in the tea and cheese and the tea and chocolate pairing, and she's recently been to Japan and come across some experiences there.
Okay, in a very concise reason, there are probably many reasons, but I think after growing up sharing tea in a family, very much in the English style way of drinking tea, so the black tea with milk, when my world of tea was first opened up when I went on my honeymoon with my husband in 2005. And he treated me to an experience to sit with a Singaporean tea master. And when I learned that there were so many different types and styles of tea out there, which I've never been exposed to, never really heard about, that are enjoyed like that every day in Asia, it was just something that I felt I needed to take a bit of a deeper dive into. And I think because I'm adopted and my parents are Australian, very much Western traditions, tea for me has been a slight journey from a very personal perspective to learning a bit more about my cultural heritage. And as Taiwanese, tea it's has a huge culture of tea, I should say. I think by understanding that a little bit more, it helps me to understand myself and my background. Big area of interest of mine at the moment. I think there are huge opportunities for tea within the hospitality industry. I think it's fair to say that tea is first and foremost, largely misunderstood in the hospitality sector. So it's unfortunately given very little thought in terms of something more than a secondary option for a beverage that just sits on the menu because people might ask for it. And there's no real thought process in terms of what's being offered. So I see the opportunity for tea with hospitality very much on creating sort of specially curated menus that work well with the food menus that are being offered by the establishment. Because a lot of these hospitality, the restaurants and cafes are spending so much time on their food menu. They spend so much time on ensuring they've got either a good wine list and a good coffee, but tea is just neglected and it's just a secondary thought. So I think there's massive opportunities there. And when people are actually introduced to tea and the various flavours and aromas they can carry, you can soon find that they actually complement and enhance food items on the menu. So it could be something that becomes a defining difference for that hospitality client, I guess. And then there's a secondary opportunity for tea within the hospitality sector, and that is as an ingredient. So adding tea into either food menus as something within the meal or the dessert, or into cocktails and mocktails, and as in terms of tea mixology, that's another big area. But I think stepping back, tea is very much at the sort of start of its ability to build its industry links in this area, which is great as it's a huge opportunity, but also too, I think it's something that we as the industry really need to treat with some respect. And guide those hospitality clients well in terms of the decisions that they make. So I think it's equally as beneficial bringing our tea ideas to the hospitality sector, but on the other side, ensuring that the hospitality sector can interact with us as tea professionals for us to understand how things work, whether that's in high volume coffee cafes or whether that's in fine dining establishments, and understanding how the tea service would actually fit amongst wine service and everything else that's going on. So I think it's going to be a two-way learning experience for both of us. And if we tap into that and we share our knowledge and be open to that, there's great things that can happen for tea and the hospitality sector.
So at this point, I'm going to say that you're sitting in what would normally be sunny Queensland.
Yes, it's raining heavy.
Pouring! What's your approach to the tea and food pairing? Because I see lots of different approaches out there, and you have been running quite successful tea and cheese events.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to ask you a bit more about that. Your tea and food approach.
Sure. So I guess sort of my journey in tea and food pairing. So yes, tea and cheese events have been something that I've been doing quite a bit of up here in normally sunny Brisbane. But also more recently I've done a tea and chocolate pairing, which I'll come on to a little bit later because you've got some other questions that leads into. And also to what I've found with some introductory tea workshops that I've been doing, more about the joy of tea, I guess I would call these workshops. I do try and do a small tea and food pairing as I'm delivering the tea knowledge as well, just because I think it makes it a little bit more approachable and fun for people. So that's sort of how I've been dabbling in tea and food. In terms of my approach, I think that's a really good question, and I hadn't really thought of it too much until you've been started asking me about it. So, which leads me to think that I'm not hugely methodical in the way that I approach the tea and food pairings. But when I sit down and break it down, I guess there is some process and thought that goes into it. So part of it's been intuitive, but part of it for me is very much understanding the ingredient, or the food that I'm trying to pair the tea with. So I normally will sit down and taste either the cheese or the chocolate or the potential food menu item, and think about what flavours and aromas that I'm experiencing as I'm tasting. The other thing that I really do is think about what the overall impression that leaves on me, whether, it's satisfying or I'm happy or, or it's like, oh, that's a bit bland. And that, I think that's really the sorts of questions that lead me into thinking about what tea I would then go ahead and pair the item with. And I like to focus a lot on texture and mouthfeel. So how does that, after tasting the cheese, for example, and then the tea, how does that sit in my mouth, and how does that make me feel in terms of an experience? So I think that's sort of my approach to tea and food pairing. I have reflected on there are some reference tools out there that tea and food professionals use. Things like there's a flavour thesaurus, there's foodpairing.com, which is another website that helps to match certain flavours. I just find that for myself, I don't work that way. So I'd much rather, I like to read over those tools to just see that what I'm doing is not completely off the mark. Yeah, and I think with tea and food pairing, the one thing I do like to do is really have one experimental tea and food pairing in the menu somewhere, mainly because I think it's quite easy to pair tea and food safely in terms of those flavours are nice together or work well, but I really like to push myself in terms of bringing two unexpected flavours or textural elements together, and there's nothing more satisfying than hearing people sort of come up to you at the end of an event or a workshop and saying, I've never put those two things together, but they worked perfectly. So I'm always looking to have that one experience in there, and sometimes that's polarising and some people might not enjoy it, but I think as a specialist from a tea perspective, I just like to get people to talk about it and to think about it. The way people experience tea and food is so much dependent on the experience you're trying to deliver, their personal ability to taste and enjoy flavours and their own experience, so how many different flavours and aromas they've ever encountered as well. And I think it's probably about sort of defining the expectation around how they're going to enjoy it. So is it a workshop setting? Are they just trying to get hints on how to get to find teas that might match with foods, or is it actually an experience you're trying to create where they walk away and think, wow, that was really enjoyable, not for any mechanics of breaking down tea and food pairing, but just because it just works so nicely and flowed really well. So I think in creating tea and food experiences, it's a little bit about finding an approach that will match the audience in terms of what they're expecting.